Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a story that's, well, it's just as absolutely fascinating as it is deeply, deeply ironic. We're looking at one of the most sophisticated supply chain attacks in the history of the cybersecurity industry. And you know what? We're actually going to skip the usual agenda today. I really want to preserve the sheer mystery and the kind of unfolding shock of how this breach actually went down. Let's just say the organizations involved in this, they're literally the last ones you'd ever expect to see on a victim list.
Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine the very people who build the unbreakable vaults, right? The actual experts who write the literal rulebook on digital defense, getting their own pockets picked. That is exactly what happened here. We're looking at a scenario where top-tier security firms fell victim to a massive supply chain breach. It's just a stunning paradox, and it really proves that no one, and I mean no one, is immune when the threat comes from inside a trusted network.
Just think about these heavyweight names for a second. Huntress, HackerOne, Jamf, Recorder Future, and Tanium. These aren't your average companies. These are the organizations that teach everyone else about cybersecurity best practices. Huntress does managed detection and response. HackerOne, literally the world's largest bug bounty platform. Tanium secures Fortune 100 companies and government agencies. And yet, they all found themselves caught in the exact same net. And wow, they were far from alone. Reports suggest that over 700 organizations were potentially exposed in this single attack. That's a massive blast radius. How does that even happen? Well, it all came down to one shared connection, a competitive intelligence platform called Klue, which is used by hundreds of major enterprises. The attackers didn't have to break into 700 individual fortresses. Nope, they just had to find one single vulnerability at Klue, and bam, they had access to them all. Part 1. Anatomy of the attack. The forgotten key. To truly understand honestly, the dark genius of this breach, we have to look at the mechanics of a forgotten key. Let's talk about OAuth tokens. Now, you likely know them as those delegated access frameworks that allow apps to securely access resources on an organization's behalf, right? Bypassing passwords entirely. It's what lets a platform like Klue talk directly to a CRM like Salesforce. But here is the absolutely critical detail in this attack. Unlike traditional credentials, these tokens often have absolutely no expiration date. They just sit silently in the background until somebody manually revokes them. Now, what's really interesting about this comparison is the sheer contrast between a traditional attack and an OAuth attack. Traditional hacks, they're loud. Attackers use brute force or zero-day exploits, which trip wires and set off security alerts everywhere. But OAuth hacks, they are completely, terrifyingly silent. Because the attackers are using valid credentials and making legitimate API calls, they're basically invisible to standard defenses. The system just looks at it and thinks, well, business as usual. So what was the actual spark that ignited this whole disaster? Well, the attackers didn't bust down Klue's front door. Instead, they infiltrated Klue's internal infrastructure using a legacy GitHub personal access token. This was a credential that had been shared with a vendor years ago and was just never revoked. It sat there, completely active and totally forgotten, until the attackers stumbled upon it and used it to steal the OAuth tokens that Klue's customers use to connect to third-party platforms. Just wild. Part 2. Enter the Icarus Crink. With the keys firmly in hand, a new antagonist steps onto the stage, the Icarus Group. They're a relatively new ransomware operation, but unlike the groups that, loudly encrypt your files and demand a massive payout, Icarus focuses purely on quiet data theft and extortion. Let's walk through their timeline, because it's terrifying. Initial access happened in early June 2026. Then, between June 10th and 15th, they pushed a malicious code update to Klue that was designed specifically to capture OAuth tokens. By June 16th, using automated Python scripts, they started silently siphoning data from Salesforce APIs. It wasn't until June 18th that Huntress and ReliaQuest finally detected the suspicious patterns. That is nearly 2 whole weeks of dwell time, where the attackers were just roaming completely free. And during that massive window, while they were masquerading as legitimate Klue API traffic, the attackers extracted some incredibly sensitive business intelligence. We're talking customer contacts, private sales communications, detailed pricing information, and opportunity notes. Make no mistake, this wasn't a quick smash and grab. It was a highly organized, surgical extraction of competitive business data. Part 3. The evolution of OAuth threats. The Klue incident is absolutely shocking for sure, but it represents a terrifying broader industry trend, and this brilliantly illustrates the explosive growth we're seeing. Look at the numbers. Back in 2024, there were 45 reported global OAuth attack incidents. But by 2026, that number jumped to 183. This data clearly shows us that hackers have realized the massive return on investment these attacks offer. It's a highly efficient, highly lucrative way to breach a ton of targets all at once. Let's break down exactly why this method has become the new gold standard for cybercriminals. First off, there's the multiplier effect. You breach one vendor, you hit hundreds of victims. Second, it generates literally 0 failed login attempts, which completely bypasses traditional behavioral alerts. Plus, like we mentioned earlier, these tokens often lack expiration dates and they have overly permissive data access scopes. That means an attacker gets way more access than they actually need for as long as they possibly want it. It's a hacker's dream. I want to pause for a second on a quote from the source material because it perfectly encapsulates the real danger here. The attackers weren't breaking in through the front door. They were using a valid key that had been forgotten in the lock. It is absolutely vital to grasp that poor credential hygiene is just as dangerous, if not way more dangerous, than an unpatched software vulnerability. Part 4, Action Plan for Security Leaders. Okay, we've seen the disaster, but now we're pivoting toward empowerment. If you're a CISO, a developer, or really anyone managing IT infrastructure, here is your recovery and prevention plan. Listen up. Within 24 hours, you absolutely must audit all active OAuth grants in your systems. Within 1 week, implement real-time token monitoring. Within a month, centralize your credential lifecycle management so nothing gets forgotten. And on an ongoing basis, enforce true zero trust. So the crucial point is that credential management is not optional. It literally has to become part of your organization's daily rhythm. Let's move to the emerging defenses and see how this builds into the future of automated security. Because thankfully, the industry is fighting back. We now have OAuth security gateways acting as proxies to dynamically revoke access. SOS security posture management is out there finding those excessive permissions before they can be exploited. Behavioral analytics leverages AI to flag abnormal token activity, like a token suddenly trying to download 10,000 files out of nowhere. And zero standing privileges ensures access is only granted just in time, which dramatically shrinks the attacker's window. A massive takeaway from this entire event, though, is the response of the victims. Huntress and the others exercised radical transparency. They published detailed technical analyses of exactly how they were breached. And, security is an ongoing community effort, right? It's not some permanent state of perfection. When companies share their vulnerabilities like this, it arms the rest of the industry to defend against those exact same tactics. It's transparency over secrecy, every time. Well, this brings us to the end of our explainer, and I want to leave you with one final, pretty urgent thought to take back to your teams. You might have the best firewalls on the market. You might have the most advanced endpoint protection and a totally secure perimeter. But I really have to ask, how many forgotten keys are sitting in your locks right now, just waiting to be found?